In a lively neighborhood where the streets buzzed with people going about their day, a young woman named Maya was just another face in the crowd. At 21 years old, she had a spark in her eyes and a dream to share her world with others. Armed, with nothing more than her phone, she started recording a live video as she walked home from work. Her followers loved how real and relatable she was. They tuned in not just for entertainment, but also to see life through her lens. Raw, unfiltered, and honest. That evening, however, something unusual caught her attention. As she strolled past a small corner store, she noticed a police officer talking to a young man. The tone of the conversation felt off. It wasn't casual or friendly. It was tense. The officer's voice carried an edge of aggression, and the young man looked uneasy, his hands raised slightly in surrender. Something about the scene didn't sit right with Maya. She slowed down, curiosity getting the better of her. Her followers could hear her narrating what she saw. "Hey guys," she said into the camera, her voice calm but concerned. "There's a cop over here questioning this guy, and it feels kind of intense. I don't know what's happening, but I'm gonna stay close and see if everything's okay." She moved a little closer, making sure her phone captured the interaction clearly. To her, this was just another way to document everyday life. But deep down, she hoped her presence might make the situation less volatile. But things took a sudden turn when the officer spotted her. His gaze shifted from the young man to Maya, narrowing as he realized she was filming him. His jaw tightened and his body language changed instantly. He marched toward her, his boots thudding heavily against the pavement. "What do you think you're doing?" he barked, his voice cutting through the air like a knife. Maya froze for a moment, startled by his tone. Then, trying to keep her composure, she replied, "I'm just walking home and filming. There's no harm in that." Her voice wavered, slightly, betraying the nervousness building inside her. But she refused to let fear take over. After all, she was simply exercising her right to record in public, a fact she reminded herself of repeatedly. The officer didn't seem interested in hearing any explanations. Instead, his face twisted into a scowl, and without warning, he reached for his gun. In one swift motion, he pulled it out and pointed it directly at Maya. The camera shook violently as her hands trembled, capturing every second of the terrifying ordeal. "Put that phone down," he shouted, his voice loud enough to draw stares from passers-by. "You're interfering with law enforcement." For a split second, time seemed to stand still. Maya's heart pounded in her chest as adrenaline surged through her veins. She couldn't believe what was happening. Here she was, minding her own business, and now she was staring down the barrel of a gun, all because she dared to film something. That didn't feel right. Her mind raced with questions. Was this really happening? Did he have the authority to do this? And most importantly, would anyone step in to help? Her followers watched in stunned silence as the live stream continued. Some typed frantic comments urging her to stay safe, while others expressed outrage at the officer's actions. Despite the chaos unfolding around her, Maya managed to steady her voice. "Sir, I'm not breaking any laws," she said firmly, though her knees felt weak beneath her. "I'm allowed to film in public. You can't threaten me like this." But the officer wasn't listening. If anything, his anger grew. He stepped closer, his weapon still trained on her. "I said put it down," he repeated, his words dripping with hostility. Maya hesitated for a moment before slowly lowering her phone, her instincts telling her not to provoke him further. Even then, she kept the camera rolling, determined to capture every detail of the encounter. As the tension escalated, a few bystanders began gathering nearby, drawn by the commotion. Some whipped out their own phones, capturing the scene from different angles. Others called out to the officer, asking him to explain why he was behaving so aggressively. Their voices added to the growing cacophony, creating a surreal atmosphere that felt both chaotic and surreal. Back online, Maya's livestream had gone from a casual walk home to a viral sensation. Thousands of viewers tuned in live, shocked by what they were witnessing. Comments flooded the screen, ranging from expressions of disbelief to calls for immediate action. Hashtags like Protect Maya and Stop Police Abuse started trending almost instantly, spreading awareness far beyond the confines of her neighborhood. Meanwhile, Maya remained frozen in place, unsure of what would happen next. The officer's finger hovered dangerously close to the trigger, and she couldn't shake the feeling that one wrong move could end disastrously. Yet amidst the fear gripping her heart, a flicker of determination ignited within her. She knew this moment mattered, not just for her but for everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Little did she, or the officer, know that this incident would set off a chain reaction neither of them could have anticipated. Karma, as they say, has a way of balancing the scales, and for the officer whose reckless behavior had already sparked outrage, the consequences were about to unfold in ways he never imagined. Though Maya's ordeal was far from over, her courage, in those harrowing moments, planted the seeds of change. What began as a simple act of documenting her surroundings soon became a pivotal moment in the fight for accountability and justice, a story that would resonate with countless people and inspire them to stand up against abuse of power. The moment Maya's livestream ended, the internet exploded. Thousands of people had watched the incident live, and within minutes, clips of the confrontation were being shared across social media platforms like wildfire. The footage showed everything: the officer's aggressive tone, the gun pointed at Maya, and her calm yet frightened attempts to reason with him. Viewers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Comments poured in, expressing shock, anger, and solidarity with Maya. One viewer typed, "This is insane. How can someone pull a gun on an innocent person just for filming?" Another wrote, "She wasn't doing anything wrong. This is exactly why we need to hold police accountable." The hashtags "Dank Justice for Maya" and "Stop Police Brutality" quickly gained traction, trending not only locally but globally. People from different countries chimed in, sharing their own stories of unfair treatment by law enforcement. It was clear that Maya's experience had struck a nerve, sparking conversations about trust, accountability, and systemic issues within policing. As the video spread, journalists and news outlets picked up the story. Within hours, major networks began reporting on the incident, amplifying its reach even further. Reporters dug deeper, uncovering troubling details about the officer involved. They discovered a pattern of complaints filed against him over the years: allegations of excessive force, racial profiling, and verbal abuse. Though none of these complaints had led to serious consequences for him before, this time felt different. The sheer volume of public outrage made it impossible for authorities to ignore. Locally, the community rallied together. Activists organized protests outside the police station, demanding answers and accountability. Signs reading "No justice, no peace," and "We deserve better" filled the streets as hundreds of residents marched peacefully, chanting slogans and holding candles in memory of others who had suffered similar injustices. Maya's face became a symbol of resilience, a reminder that speaking up even when it's scary can lead to change. Amidst all the chaos, Maya herself was overwhelmed. She hadn't expected her simple act of documenting her day to blow up the way it did. At first, she felt scared of retaliation, scared of becoming a target. But as messages of support flooded her inbox, something shifted inside her. Strangers reached out, thanking her for having the courage to stand her ground. Some shared their own experiences, telling her how her bravery inspired them to speak out too. Slowly, Maya realized she wasn't alone. There was a whole community, standing behind her, ready to fight for justice alongside her. Encouraged by the outpouring of support, Maya decided to use her platform to keep the momentum going. She started posting updates regularly, keeping her followers informed about what was happening next. She also used her voice to highlight other cases of police misconduct, shining a light on stories that might otherwise have gone unnoticed. Her newfound role as an advocate came naturally. After all, she had always cared deeply about fairness and equality. Now she saw an opportunity to make a real difference. But while Maya found strength in the support around her, the officer at the center of the controversy faced mounting pressure. His name and face were plastered everywhere, accompanied by calls for his immediate suspension. Online petitions demanding accountability garnered tens of thousands of signatures. Even some of his fellow officers distanced themselves from him, knowing that his actions reflected poorly on the entire department. Behind closed doors, Internal Affairs launched an investigation into the incident. Body cam footage, witness statements, and past records were reviewed meticulously. For the first time, it seemed like there might actually be consequences for someone in uniform who abused their power. The weight of public scrutiny forced officials to take action quickly, lest they risk losing the already fragile trust between the community and law enforcement. Meanwhile, the viral nature of the incident brought attention to broader issues beyond just one bad officer. Conversations about reform gained steam, with people calling for measures like increased transparency, mandatory body cameras, and independent oversight boards to monitor police behavior. Lawmakers started discussing potential policy changes, recognizing that the system needed more than just Band-Aid solutions. Maya's ordeal had become a catalyst for something much bigger, a movement toward long-overdue reforms. Still, amidst all the progress, tensions remained high. The officer doubled down on his defense, claiming he had acted within protocol and accusing Maya of provoking him. His statements only fueled more anger among the public, who saw them as excuses rather than explanations. Social media users dissected every word he said, pointing out inconsistencies and biases in his version of events. It became increasingly clear that his attempts to justify his actions weren't going to sway anyone. For Maya, the whirlwind of attention was both empowering and exhausting. On one hand, she felt grateful for the support and energized by the possibility of creating meaningful change. On the other hand, she couldn't shake the fear that lingered from that terrifying encounter. Night after night, she replayed the scene in her mind, the cold glint of the gun, the sound of his voice barking orders, the way her body froze in panic. She knew it would take time to heal from the trauma, but she refused to let it silence her. If anything, it made her more determined to ensure no one else had to go through what she did. As days turned into weeks, the story continued to evolve. New developments emerged almost daily. Updates on the investigation, announcements from city officials, and fresh waves of protests. Each new piece of information kept the conversation alive, ensuring that the spotlight remained firmly fixed on the issue at hand. And through it all, Maya stood firm, using her voice to remind everyone why this mattered. What started as a routine walk home had spiraled into a national reckoning, a testament to the power of courage and collective action. While the road ahead promised challenges, one thing was certain: Maya's bravery had ignited a spark that couldn't be extinguished. Karma, as many noted online, seemed to be working in mysterious ways. And for the officer whose reckless behavior had set everything in motion, the consequences were only beginning to unfold. Just when it seemed like the story couldn't get any more intense, fate decided to throw another twist into the mix. A few days after the viral incident with Maya, the officer found himself responding to a call in a quiet suburban neighborhood. It was supposed to be a routine domestic disturbance, a husband and wife arguing loudly enough for neighbors to hear. Nothing out of the ordinary, or so it seemed at first glance. When he arrived on the scene, the officer stepped out of his patrol car with the same air of authority he always carried. His badge gleamed under the streetlights and his uniform gave him an imposing presence. But this time something felt different. The couple standing outside their home didn't back down when he approached them. Instead, they stood their ground, visibly upset, not just with each other but also with him. The husband, still fuming from the argument, accused the officer of being unnecessarily aggressive right off the bat. "Why are you yelling? We're not criminals," he shouted, his voice shaking with frustration. The wife chimed in, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Yeah, calm down. You're making things worse," she added, glaring at him. The officer, used to commanding respect or at least fear, didn't take kindly to their pushback. His temper flared almost instantly. He raised his voice, barking orders and accusing them of being uncooperative. Witnesses later described how his tone escalated rapidly, turning what should have been a calm conversation into a heated confrontation. And then, without warning, he reached for his gun, holding it up as if to intimidate them into submission. It was a chilling echo of the incident with Maya. Once again, his actions were caught on camera, but this time it wasn't just one person filming. Several neighbors had gathered outside, horrified by the unfolding scene. Phones were out, capturing every second of the drama. Someone even live-streamed the altercation, drawing hundreds of viewers within minutes. Comments flooded in, many of them referencing the earlier incident with Maya. "Isn't this the same guy?" one viewer typed. "He's doing it again." Among the crowd was a man who happened to be visiting family in the area. He was no ordinary bystander. He was a well-known civil rights attorney who had spent years fighting against police misconduct. When he saw the officer waving his weapon around and shouting threats, his blood boiled. He recognized the face immediately. It was the same officer from the viral video involving Maya. This wasn't just reckless behavior. It was a pattern. Without hesitation, the attorney stepped forward, introducing himself to the couple and offering his help. "You don't deserve to be treated like this," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the tension. Then turning to the officer, he added, "I suggest you lower your weapon before this escalates further." The officer hesitated, clearly caught off guard by the unexpected challenge. For a moment, there was silence, a standoff between power and principle. After what felt like an eternity, the officer reluctantly holstered his gun, muttering under his breath about people not understanding his job, but the damage was done. The footage captured during those tense moments painted a damning picture of his conduct. It showed not only his aggression but also his inability to de-escalate a situation. Worse still, it reinforced the narrative that had already taken root online. This officer was a danger to the community. Back in the digital world, the new video spread like wildfire. People drew direct parallels between this incident and the one with Maya. Social media erupted once again, with hashtags like Modern Accountability now trending alongside older ones like Ridicule Justice for Maya. Commentators pointed out the alarming consistency in the officer's behavior, questioning how someone with such a volatile temperament could still be wearing a badge. Calls for his immediate removal from duty grew louder, echoing across platforms and amplifying the pressure on local authorities. Meanwhile, the attorney wasted no time. Recognizing the significance of the moment, he reached out to Maya directly. "I've seen what you've been through," he told her during their first phone call, "and I want to help you take this fight to the next level." Maya, still processing everything that had happened, was hesitant at first. She wasn't sure if she was ready to dive into a legal battle, especially given the emotional toll it might take. But the attorney reassured her, explaining that her case could set a powerful precedent, one that might lead to real change. Together, they began planning their next steps. The attorney filed a formal complaint on Maya's behalf, detailing not only the officer's actions during their encounter, but also highlighting the broader pattern of misconduct revealed by recent events. He also reached out to other victims who had filed complaints against the officer in the past, encouraging them to come forward and share their stories. One by one, these voices joined forces, creating a chorus of testimony that left little room for doubt about the officer's behavior. As the investigation into both incidents deepened, cracks began to show within the police department itself. Some officers privately expressed discomfort with the way the situation was being handled, admitting that they too had witnessed troubling behavior from their colleague in the past. Others, however, doubled down on defending him, arguing that he was simply doing his job in difficult circumstances. These conflicting perspectives only added fuel to the fire, exposing divisions within the force that mirrored the larger societal debate about policing. Public opinion, meanwhile, remained firmly on Maya's side. Protesters continued to march, now armed with fresh evidence of the officer's misconduct. Signs reading "Enough is enough" and "Protect our communities" filled the streets, while chants of "No justice, no peace" echoed through neighborhoods. The movement had grown beyond a single incident. It had become a symbol of resistance against systemic issues that had plagued communities for generations. For the officer, the walls were closing in. Once confident in his position of authority, he now found himself isolated and under intense scrutiny. Every word he spoke, every move he made was dissected and criticized. Even his colleagues kept their distance, wary of being associated with someone whose reputation was crumbling before their eyes. Karma, it seemed, was working faster than anyone expected. Despite the mounting challenges, Maya remained focused. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she had something powerful on her side: truth. With each passing day, more people rallied behind her cause, inspired by her courage and determination. What started as a personal nightmare had transformed into a collective effort to demand accountability and justice. As the pieces fell into place, one thing became clear. This wasn't just about one officer or one incident anymore. It was about breaking cycles of abuse, challenging systems of power, and proving that even the smallest acts of bravery can spark monumental change. And though the journey was far from over, Maya, and everyone standing with her, was ready to see it through to the end. As the investigation into the officer's conduct intensified, the weight of evidence against him became impossible to ignore. The attorney representing Maya worked tirelessly, gathering testimonies, reviewing body cam footage, and piecing together a timeline that painted a damning picture of repeated misconduct. Each new discovery added another layer to the case, making it clear that this wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a disturbing pattern. The legal process moved forward with surprising speed, fueled by public pressure and media attention. Local officials, who had initially tried to downplay the situation, were now forced to act decisively. Internal Affairs launched a full-scale review of the officer's career, combing through years of complaints and disciplinary records. What they found was staggering: multiple allegations of excessive force, racial bias, and unprofessional behavior, all of which had been brushed aside or swept under the rug in the past. For Maya, watching the pieces come together was both empowering and emotionally draining. She attended every hearing, sitting quietly in the courtroom while her attorney presented evidence on her behalf. Her presence served as a reminder of the human cost of unchecked power. Outside the courthouse, supporters gathered daily, holding signs and chanting slogans in solidarity. Some even brought flowers, leaving them at the steps as a gesture of gratitude for her bravery. During one particularly intense session, former victims of the officer took the stand to share their stories. One woman recounted how he had pulled her over for no apparent reason, berating her in front of her children before issuing a ticket for a minor infraction. Another man described being shoved against a wall during a routine stop, leaving bruises that took weeks to heal. Their testimonies were raw and heartfelt, painting a vivid portrait of someone who wielded authority not as a tool for justice, but as a weapon for intimidation. Every word spoken in that courtroom resonated deeply with Maya. She saw herself reflected in their struggles, the same fear, the same helplessness, the same burning desire for accountability. It wasn't just about her anymore. It was about all the people who had suffered in silence, afraid to speak up because they didn't think anyone would listen. Now, thanks to her courage, those voices were finally being heard. Public outrage reached a fever pitch as details from the trial made headlines. Journalists covered every twist and turn, ensuring the story stayed in the spotlight. Social media played a crucial role too, with hashtags like "Hold Them Accountable" and "Change the System," keeping the conversation alive. Online, people from all walks of life joined the discussion, sharing their thoughts and experiences. Teachers, students, parents, and professionals weighed in, united by a shared belief that something needed to change. Even celebrities and influencers lent their voices to the cause, amplifying the message to millions of followers worldwide. 1. Popular content creator posted a video explaining why the case mattered, urging viewers to educate themselves and get involved. "This isn't just about one bad cop," she said passionately. "It's about fixing a broken system that allows people like him to operate without consequences." Her words struck a chord, sparking donations to organizations fighting for police reform and encouraging volunteers to join local advocacy groups. Back in the community, the momentum continued to build. Activists organized workshops and town hall meetings, inviting experts to discuss solutions for improving policing practices. Topics ranged from implementing stricter accountability measures to investing in mental health resources for officers. Attendees left these events feeling informed and inspired, eager to contribute to meaningful change. Meanwhile, the officer at the center of the controversy grew increasingly desperate. Once confident and untouchable, he now appeared shaken, his usual bravado replaced by defensiveness. During cross-examinations in court, he stumbled over his answers, contradicting himself repeatedly. His attempts to justify his actions only dug him deeper into trouble, further alienating him from the public and even some of his colleagues. As the trial neared its conclusion, anticipation hung thick in the air. Would justice finally be served? Or would the system protect one of its own once again? The jury deliberated for 2 tense days, weighing the mountain of evidence before them. When they finally returned with a verdict, the courtroom fell silent, everyone holding their breath. Kanker, foreman, stood up, his voice steady as he read the decision aloud. "Guilty on all counts," he announced, sending ripples of emotion throughout the room. Cheers erupted outside as news spread quickly, drawing cheers and applause from the crowd gathered outside the courthouse. Strangers hugged each other, tears streaming down their faces. For many, it felt like a long overdue victory, a sign that accountability was possible, even in the face of entrenched resistance. But while the verdict brought relief, it also underscored the work that still lay ahead. Holding one person accountable wasn't enough. Systemic issues required systemic solutions. Maya understood this better than anyone. As she addressed reporters after the trial, she emphasized the importance of continuing the fight. "This is a step forward," she said, her voice filled with determination. "But we can't stop here. We need real change. Change that protects everyone, no matter who they are or where they come from." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring others to keep pushing for reform. Lawmakers began drafting bills aimed at increasing transparency within law enforcement, including mandatory body cameras and independent oversight boards. Community leaders partnered with activists to create programs focused on building trust between residents and police. Conversations shifted from anger and frustration to hope and collaboration, driven by a shared vision of a safer, fairer future. For the officer, however, there was no redemption. Stripped of his badge and sentenced to prison time, he became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder of what happens when power goes unchecked. Behind bars, he faced the consequences of his actions alone, haunted by the knowledge that his arrogance had cost him everything. And yet, amidst the fallout, there was a sense of closure, not just for Maya but for everyone who had been touched by the case. Justice had been served, not perfectly but significantly. It was proof that standing up, speaking out, and demanding better could lead to tangible results. Karma, as many noted, had delivered its verdict swiftly and decisively. Though the journey was far from over, the impact of Maya's courage rippled outward, touching lives far beyond her own. Her story reminded people of the power of resilience, the importance of community, and the enduring hope that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. And for those still fighting for justice, it served as a beacon, a reminder that change, though slow and difficult, was always worth pursuing. The verdict was a turning point, but it wasn't the end of the road. For Maya, the trial's outcome brought a mix of emotions, relief, vindication, and a lingering sense of unease. While justice had been served in this one case, she couldn't shake the feeling that the system was still broken. The officer's punishment was a step forward, yes, but it didn't erase the years of harm he had caused. It didn't fix the cracks in the foundation of law enforcement that allowed such behavior to go unchecked for so long. Maya knew there was more work to be done. In the weeks following the verdict, Maya became a symbol of resilience and hope. Her face appeared on magazine covers, and talk shows invited her to share her story. At first, she hesitated. The spotlight made her uncomfortable, especially after everything she'd been through. But then she realized something important. Her voice mattered. If she could use her platform to keep the conversation going, to push for real change, then maybe all the pain she'd endured would mean something. So she started saying yes, to interviews, to speeches, to meetings with lawmakers. She wanted to make sure people didn't forget why this fight was so important. One of her first big appearances was at a community rally held in the same neighborhood, where the incident with the officer had taken place. Hundreds of people showed up, filling the streets with signs and chants. When Maya stepped onto the stage, the crowd erupted into cheers. She looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, from different backgrounds, and felt a lump rise in her throat. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who believed in fairness and equality. "Thank you for being here today," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I never imagined I'd be standing here talking to all of you. A few months ago, I was just someone trying to get home safely. And now, because of what happened, I've become part of something much bigger than myself." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "We won a battle, but we haven't won the war. One guilty verdict doesn't fix everything. We need to keep pushing for change, not just for me, not just for those who've been hurt, but for every person who deserves to feel safe in their own community." Her words resonated deeply with the audience. People nodded, clapped, and shouted encouragement as she spoke. Afterward, dozens of attendees approached her, sharing their own stories of injustice and thanking her for giving them hope. Some even offered to volunteer with local advocacy groups, inspired by her determination to make a difference. Maya left, the rally feeling both exhausted and energized, knowing she was exactly where she needed to be. As momentum grew, so did efforts to reform policing practices. Lawmakers introduced new legislation aimed at increasing accountability within law enforcement. One proposed bill required all officers to wear body cameras at all times, with strict penalties for failing to record interactions with the public. Another focused on creating independent oversight boards to investigate complaints against police, ensuring that investigations weren't influenced by internal biases. These measures weren't perfect, but they represented progress, a start toward rebuilding trust between communities and those sworn to protect them. Maya played an active role in advocating for these changes. She testified at legislative hearings, sharing her experience to highlight the urgent need for reform. Her testimony was raw and honest, pulling no punches when describing how it felt to have a gun pointed at her simply for exercising her rights. "It's not enough to say most cops are good," she told lawmakers during one session. "Even one bad apple can ruin the whole bunch if we don't deal with the root of the problem. Trust isn't built overnight. It's earned through consistent action and accountability." Her message struck a chord, earning praise from activists and allies alike. Social media buzzed with support, with hashtags like Reform Now and Listen to Maya, trending alongside updates on the proposed bills. People shared videos of her speeches, tagging their elected representatives and urging them to take action. The pressure worked. Within months, several key reforms were passed into law, marking a significant victory for grassroots movements across the country. But Maya didn't stop there. She understood that true change required more than just policy shifts. It needed education, dialogue, and healing. To address these needs, she founded a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting victims of police misconduct and promoting community-based solutions. The group offered free legal assistance to those seeking justice, hosted workshops on citizens' rights, and facilitated conversations between residents and law enforcement officials. Its mission was simple yet powerful: empower people to stand up for themselves while fostering understanding and collaboration. Through her nonprofit, Maya also worked to amplify voices often overlooked in discussions about policing. She partnered with youth organizations, hosting panels where teenagers could share their perspectives on safety and justice. She collaborated with elders in marginalized communities, documenting their experiences to ensure their stories weren't forgotten. Every initiative reinforced the idea that meaningful change came from listening to those most affected by systemic issues. Of course, not everyone supported her efforts. Critics argued that focusing on individual cases distracted from larger societal problems. Others accused her of being too radical or unrealistic in her demands. Even some former supporters grew frustrated when progress seemed slow, but Maya refused to let negativity derail her mission. Change takes time, she reminded herself whenever doubt crept in. If we give up, nothing will ever improve. Despite the challenges, her perseverance paid off. Slowly but surely, attitudes began to shift. More police departments adopted training programs focused on de-escalation and cultural sensitivity. Community members reported feeling heard and respected during town hall meetings. And perhaps most importantly, people started believing that they had the power to shape their future, that together they could create a world where everyone felt safe and valued. For Maya, the journey was transformative, not just for the community but for herself as well. The trauma of that fateful day hadn't disappeared. It lingered in quiet moments when fear threatened to creep back in. But she learned to channel that pain into purpose, using it as fuel to keep moving forward. She surrounded herself with loved ones and leaned on the support of fellow advocates, finding strength in their shared commitment to justice. Looking back, Maya realized how far she'd come since that terrifying walk home. What started as a personal nightmare had evolved into a movement, one that inspired countless others to join the fight for a better tomorrow. Though the road ahead would undoubtedly have its obstacles, she faced them with unwavering resolve. After all, she had seen firsthand what courage and unity could achieve, and she knew deep down that the best way to honor her journey was to keep going, to keep fighting, speaking, and believing in the possibility of change. A year had passed since the night that changed Maya's life forever. It was hard to believe how much had happened in such a short time. From being an ordinary young woman walking home to becoming a symbol of hope and resilience, her journey had been anything but predictable. Now, standing on stage at a major human rights conference, Maya took a moment to soak it all in. The room was packed with people, activists, lawmakers, students, and everyday citizens, all gathered to discuss ways to make the world fairer and safer for everyone. As she adjusted the microphone and scanned the audience, Maya felt a mix of nerves and gratitude. This wasn't her first big speech, but it still carried weight. She knew she wasn't just speaking for herself. She was representing everyone who had ever felt powerless or unseen. Taking a deep breath, she began. "Good morning," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies fluttering in her stomach. "When I think about where I was a year ago, I can hardly believe this is real. Back then, I was just someone trying to live my life, hoping to get through each day without trouble. But sometimes, life throws you into situations you never asked for, and if you're lucky, those moments teach you something about yourself and the world around you." She paused, letting her words sink in. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. For me, that moment came when I found myself staring down the barrel of a gun. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because I dared to document what I saw. At the time, I didn't realize how much that act would mean, not just for me, but for so many others who have faced similar injustices. What started as a simple live stream turned into a movement, a reminder that even small actions can spark big change. Her voice grew stronger as she continued, weaving together personal reflections with calls to action. We've made progress since then. Laws have changed, conversations have started, and communities are coming together to demand accountability. But let's not kid ourselves, this fight isn't over. There's still so much work to do. We need to keep pushing for transparency, for fairness, for systems that protect instead of harm. And we need to remember why we're doing this, for the people who deserve better. Maya went on to share stories from her nonprofit organization, the victories, the challenges, and the lessons learned along the way. She talked about meeting families torn apart by police violence, teenagers dreaming of safer neighborhoods, and officers willing to listen and grow. Each story highlighted the complexity of the issue, showing that solutions couldn't come from anger alone. They required empathy, collaboration, and persistence. By the end of her speech, the crowd was on its feet, applauding loudly. People approached her afterward, shaking her hand and thanking her for her courage. Some shared their own experiences, while others promised to join her cause. Maya smiled warmly, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Even after everything she'd been through, she hadn't lost sight of why she kept going: to give a voice to the voiceless and to prove that change was possible. But Maya's impact extended far beyond the conference hall. Across social media, clips of her speech went viral, inspiring thousands more to take action. Schools invited her to speak to students about civic engagement, while community centers organized workshops based on her nonprofit's model. Her message resonated with people of all ages and backgrounds, reminding them that they too could make a difference, no matter how small their contribution might seem. In the months that followed, Maya traveled extensively, spreading awareness and connecting with changemakers around the world. She visited cities grappling with similar issues, learning from local activists and sharing strategies that had worked in her community. These exchanges reinforced the importance of tailoring solutions to fit specific needs rather than relying on one-size-fits-all approaches. Everywhere she went, she emphasized the value of grassroots efforts, of starting small and building momentum from the ground up. Back home, the reforms she had fought for were beginning to show results. Independent oversight boards reviewed complaints thoroughly, holding officers accountable for misconduct. Body cameras became standard equipment, providing transparency during interactions with the public. Training programs focused on de-escalation techniques helped reduce tensions between law enforcement and residents. While these changes weren't perfect, they represented steps in the right direction, proof that collective effort could lead to meaningful progress. Still, Maya remained grounded. She often reminded herself and others that true justice wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about creating a society where everyone felt valued and protected. That meant addressing root causes like poverty, inequality, and lack of access to education and healthcare. It meant investing in communities instead of criminalizing them, and it meant listening to those most affected by systemic failures, trusting them to guide the way forward. Reflecting on her journey, Maya realized how much she had grown, not just as an advocate, but as a person. The trauma of that fateful night would always be part of her, but it no longer defined her. Instead, it fueled her determination to build a brighter future. She surrounded herself with loved ones who supported her mission, leaning on them during tough times and celebrating victories together. Through it all, she held on to hope that even in the darkest moments, light could break through. One evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, Maya thought about the officer whose actions had set everything in motion. He was serving, his sentence paying the price for his choices. Karma, as people like to say, had caught up with him. But Maya didn't dwell on bitterness or resentment. Instead, she chose to focus on the positive outcomes his downfall had sparked: the reforms, the conversations, the unity. In a strange way, his recklessness had become a catalyst for good, proving that even bad decisions could lead to meaningful change. As the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Maya smiled softly. She thought about the countless individuals inspired by her story, the policies shaped by her advocacy, and the lives touched by her work. None of it had been easy, but it had all been worth it. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, not because the fight was over, but because she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The road ahead would undoubtedly have its challenges, but Maya faced them with unwavering resolve. She believed deeply in the power of courage, community, and compassion to transform the world. And as she looked toward the horizon, ready to tackle whatever came next, she knew one thing for certain: the best way to honor her journey was to keep going, to keep fighting, speaking, and believing in the possibility of change. Because in the end, that belief was what truly mattered.